Welcome to Advanced TV Herstory. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams. This is the place where we connect the dots of TV and feminism to American culture and politics. Hey TV Herstoryans, is there a moment on TV or is there a series out there that you really, really wish you could see again? Now, it's true that over the last few years, that wish has been granted for so many. Who knew that Silk Stockings and Just Shoot Me and the original 21 Jump Street could be found streaming on paid and free channels? Isn't that awesome? In just the last year, more series have been added to those apps, you know, the ones that get included in if you still have cable or that you can find on your Roku. But they may not be crystal clear on your 85-inch HD TV screen, but they will scratch that itch, that memory itch. Many of these series never even made it to DVD or are so old that they were out in VHS but not renewed into DVD. They're just sort of sitting out there as orphans. And, you know, there's a lot of work involved in resurrecting them. The lawyers and the copyrights and the way the contracts were originally constructed. But I will say you will always find me celebrating every series that makes its return. But I ask you this question, what is a show? What is a series that you would want to see, a TV moment that you would want to see again? Because it's the one that confronted me when I entered the Paley Center for Media on West 52nd Street in New York City. In town to visit our daughter, I had a few unscheduled hours to take in some culture, and the Paley Center had long been on my radar, so I kind of felt no time like the present. It's not a museum in the traditional sense, but it does contain access, think sort of a public library's computer area, to thousands of TV moments and reels and series that are perhaps not found anywhere else. Maybe they are found elsewhere, but they are for sure at the Paley. Now, the Paley Center is named after William Paley, who built CBS from its fledgling radio network of 16 stations back when TV was just in its infant stage. Paley was in charge of leading it and making it become the major entertainment force it is today. So William Paley definitely knew the power of television, partly from his radio experience, but he also understood and modeled the responsibility that the industry had to society. In the earliest days, TV was actually intended to inform and to entertain the family. It was family-focused, and I'll call it clean fun, and to spotlight culture and the arts and sports. Obviously, that's changed a lot. But according to its website, the Paley Center for Media's mission is to preserve media history and explore media's powerful shaping influence on our culture. When you look in the show notes, you will see the link for the Paley Center. There is a branch in LA as well as New York. During the year at the Paley Center, you'll find programs and events for the public and the industry. On the public side, there is PaleyFest, very well known, and lots of YouTube footage of the many years of PaleyFest because it recognizes excellence in TV and digital content creation and interactive entertainment, a bit of a hub for the gaming industry. For the industry itself, the overall industry, the Paley Center also serves as a think tank that brings together leaders and fosters community around some of the most important and pressing issues faced by the industry today. Think about AI and copyrights expiring. I mean, the recorded TV is now approaching 75, 80 years old. That brings on a whole new array of whatever the legal status was when the content was first created. Most importantly, the part I cared about, the Paley Archive is the largest public collection of television footage, over 160,000 programs spanning more than 100 years. Technically, it was the Museum of Television and Radio, and it opened its doors in New York in 1976. 40 years later, the Museum of Television and Radio was renamed the Paley Center for Media. In now 10 years of podcasting, when I am hot to study a topic, it's not often that I don't find what I'm looking for. Or to unwind that double negative, yes, I usually find clips and interviews and sometimes books about an event or a series. Sometimes I find it on VHS or DVD or an original uploaded to YouTube. The first time my efforts were truly stymied was with an early episode from 2015. The one about the 1973 primetime televised tennis match between Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs. It was called The Battle of the Sexes, and it was huge in the 70s. It tied into the ERA and to Title IX, and this was the cusp of second-wave feminism taking hold across the country. So in 2015, when I made this episode, I did so because it struck me that as a story, it was really worth telling. And it was one that so many Gen Xers and millennials were unaware because at that time, no one could see the video. We think about 2024 and the importance of what has happened in women's sports in just the last few years. And this is the last few years following Venus and Serena Williams and women's soccer holding up and sort of holding the door open and making contracts that actually meant money, not just improved access. The last few years have been important. And it sort of manifested in 2024 with the women's basketball movement capturing the nation's attention and the movement of women's hockey to now a professional league that has passed its inaugural season. More foundations for the future, and it's exciting. So 9 years ago, I devoted an episode to the Battle of the Sexes 1973. And not much later, I shined a light on Dinah Shore's incredible career. So you're saying Dinah Shore? Okay, perhaps you're old enough to know that she was known for her singing. She was a huge radio star, and she also had a super positive talk show. Lots of yellows and oranges, very perky. She always had a smile on her face, and that's actually why I named the episode Dinah Shore, the Smiling Feminist. See the link in the show notes for that episode. But rather, Dinah Shore was an integral player in the women's professional golf world. She's the only non-golfer in the Hall of Fame, or non-professional golfer in the Hall of Fame, for her work in getting women's golf tournaments funded and televised. Yes, she leveraged all of her contacts, all of her professional and entertainment capital to move women's athletics in a much more equitable fashion for televised play. So the lessons from both Billie Jean King and Dinah Shore are many, but the most enduring one is that none of that progress was easy. And as we embark on 2025, I have a gnawing feeling again that nothing will be easy. I will say that I only discovered in preparing for this recording that, in fact, there's a YouTube upload of the televised match. It was only posted 2 years ago. The link is in the show notes. I have no idea whether or not it was uploaded with the permission of the entity that actually owns the footage, which otherwise is housed in the Paley Archive. So as I sat at the Paley Center looking at a screen from which I could search for anything I wanted to see, if it's not here, it's not anywhere. My first was Eleanor Roosevelt, who I knew had a series of specials throughout the 1950s, and I think the Library of Congress perhaps has some of these videos as well. Yes, there were lots of hits to my search. I could have sat there all day watching history. But I thought some more. Chicago Hope. Yes. The CBS series from 1994 to 2001 that lasted 6 seasons, and legend has it can't be released because of messy music rights issues. Chicago Hope? Bingo. Chicago Hope is still available for viewing pleasure in New York and LA. Okay, I decided I love this place, but for fear of disturbing the others at the computer screens with their headphones on, I did not say that out loud. Then I tried for the most elusive video I knew of, the Battle of the Sexes. And there it was, 2 hours and 30 minutes. So I checked my own time schedule to see how much I could devote to this important viewing, decided I needed to fast forward through some parts. But most importantly, I knew that I wanted to get the feel for the tone, for the visuals and the audio, the event itself. It was more than just a tennis match. This event that happened so long ago was a huge deal and is part of feminist history. It is legend. So as it started, there was a note from the Paley Center warning that the quality is the best that their archivists could achieve given the equipment with which it was originally recorded back in 1973. When you think about it, so much television history is in fact tied to what technology was available at the time and how originals were stored. Google Hollywood Archives and fire, and you will learn that a lot was lost in these 2 massive fires in 1965 and 2008. Fortunately, the Battle of the Sexes was stored elsewhere. But its quality is like what you'd see when watching an old NFL highlight reel. It's slightly grainy, as the conditions of producing live TV using multiple cameras yielded a different quality. They could only put so much out into the field, away from the studios. Very different than the TV shows that we think of from that time, which in many cases are well preserved. If you're really interested in who made the best decisions and investment in production that led to really solid preservation that stood the test of time, look no further than Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz and their Desilu production studio. It's a fascinating look into the pair as business people and lovers of art. And as a result of their investments, I Love Lucy and Star Trek and I Dream of Jeannie and a few others that are still seen on TV today are because of that quality that has transcended time. Now, the other thing that I have to tell you is that the Paley Center does not allow recording of any sort in the archives, in any form. So all I could do was take notes. And here are my notes. And here is why it was an incredibly memorable experience. The announcers who were set to cover the match were ABC legend Howard Cosell and tennis players Rosie, Casals, and Jean Scott. They were current tennis players. They were in their careers. This was kind of cool. The coverage starts with this sort of man-on-the-street style interview asking prominent and regular folks who they thought would win. And as you might expect, some of the comments were really very sexist, though not seeming at the time. They made assumptions about what would pan out, and obviously those assumptions were false. There was a certain amount of publicity going on building up to the event, which was considered huge, like of a Super Bowl equivalence, and profiles particularly on Billie Jean King because she was still emerging in her career, whereas Bobby Riggs he was 55 years old. He had already had a significant tennis career. I'll spoil it here. Billie Jean King beat him. And she did so, taking the match in 3 sets. And everybody who covered it at the time, and she in her own memoir, has attributed it, I think, partly to her age. She was that much younger than he. Her physical training, her mental game's strength, and her ability to hold her cool. She did not let that crowd. It was the Astrodome, and it was not quite filled to the rafters, but it was 40,000 people, 35, I don't know. She was not rattled by any of it. And Bobby Riggs was the ultimate yapper. He's, as I said, 55 at the time, and he was this grandstander. He was a former pro who was really trying hard to milk the last 15 minutes of fame for all it was worth. And this wasn't even the first time in recent years, in the early 70s, that Riggs had challenged a woman in tennis. Just a few years earlier, he beat Margaret Court, who was considered, she was a big-name pro. Cosell, I think it was, noted that King was considered stronger than Court. This is during the commentary. And watching the first few rounds, King wore Riggs down by making him chase around the court. Rosie Casals noted that Riggs didn't have the coordination for side-to-side movement, and King was working that weakness hard. Again, homework, mental preparation. Now, listeners, if you are in your 50s or younger, you maybe don't have much experience with Howard Cosell. But you should know that for most women, Howard Cosell was the epitome of insufferable. His voice was very distinct and it was slow. He tended to mansplain. He put in opinion just because that's what men do. And if that all wasn't enough, he had a toupee that everybody made fun of. It was the butt of jokes from Johnny Carson to everywhere. Everywhere that was a joke. Howard Cosell was not entirely taken seriously, even though he was really a very knowledgeable sports broadcaster.
Hello again, everyone. It's good to have you with us for this event. It figures to be an exceptional one that doesn't need any buildup.
The rest of Monday night is given over to those gargantuan Goliaths of the gridiron for that bouncing behemoth ballet known better as professional football.
At one point, Cosell observes, "Rosie, Billie Jean looks tense to me." To which Rosie replied, "She is tense. There's a lot riding on this." I mean, Rosie Casals was literally holding up the entire feminist side of this. It was the battle was also taking place in the broadcast booth, it felt. And unlike so many women in sports TV present day or, in the 70s, You think of them, they are diplomatic and they suffer the sexism and the misogyny, and then they write about it later, and you just go, oh my God, that had to have been horrible. Well, Rosie Casals was having none of it. She was in the broadcast booth to make every single point she could. They were not going to cut off her microphone. So when Riggs was on a tear and Cosell said he looked spectacular, Rosie replied, I wouldn't say spectacular. His game is adequate right now. And then she followed that up by saying he should have to wear a dress to play if it's really going to be an equal match. Like I said, Rosie did not let up the entire time. She's my new hero. She was Billie Jean's on-air cheering section. Then, oddly enough, there was this weird 2-minute exchange. And again, mental gymnastics? Rosie predicted that Riggs would be spent by the end of the match. And I don't really remember the phrase that she used, but she kind of made it clear that, the match would end and he would be mopped off the floor. And this came as it was beginning to be clear that Billie Jean's game was strong and that she had the endurance to take it the entire length. And so Cosell, I don't know if he misheard her or if he just decided to start picking apart her statement. He asked, do you really mean that Riggs isn't going to be able to complete the match? And Rosie Casals, I can imagine, rolling her eyes to the back of her head, said, no, I just think he won't be partying afterwards. It's like, no. And it went on for 2 minutes. And you just want to, well, here we are in 2024. So in classic Howard Cosell fashion, he claimed at one point that Bobby is fighting for his tennis life. And into the third set, the play came to a stop because Bobby thought he suffered an injury to his arm. And the rules, stipulated and agreed to in advance by the two players, allowed for a 10-minute break to tend an injury if one was incurred. So Billie Jean King took those 10 minutes. She was able to sit, consult her team, sort of regroup, catch her breath. I think Bobby was just trying to play out the clock and probably more importantly, catch his breath. So with King's win certain, Cosell was sort of closing out the coverage, as they do when it's about to be a blowout. And he said to Casals, you've gotten your licks in, Rosie. He's 55 and he's some kind of guy. To which she replied, yeah, but he doesn't belong on the court. That's what happens when you're able to view the real thing and the thing that is so rare to be able to see. You find out that during that telecast, not only did Billie Jean King make history, but so did Rosie Casals. And that brought me to the next personal challenge I've set for myself. It is my hope to interview Rosie about her experience that day in the broadcast booth, and also get her take on how TV coverage of women athletes has evolved over time. And it has indeed evolved over time. Now, rumor has it she's outspoken. No, wait, there's proof. There is proof in the 2.5 hours of Battle of the Sexes, available for now on YouTube and at the Paley Center forever in LA and New York. So, listeners, to bring you herstory from rare and elusive video that's housed in a building in the middle of New York City, this is why I podcast. Find in your show notes links to the past episodes I mentioned and the Paley Center. Many thanks to audio editor Mary Lou Morose and video editor Nivea Lopez, though this episode is not available in video form. Our music is Jazzer's Take Me Higher, which is found at freemusicarchive.org. Lastly, be like Billie Jean and let your preparation prevail in your next battle. Be like Rosie and tell it like it is whenever the chance presents itself. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.